want to start briefly about who in this room knows what is a location-based game? Okay. And who has ever played with a location-based game? Okay, so that's a limited number of the participants. So I'm interested in why there is a so limited number of players of these games. And in the next 20 minutes, I will try to go through the reasons why, especially in Europe and in the US, we have this situation. So just a few words about who am I, what's my background. I'm not in the business world at all. My work is targeted to studying users and players of location-based applications, mobile applications, people who use robots or communicating objects, meaning that I visit people's home, I follow people on the street, taking pictures, videotaping them, to understand how they use those platforms to then inform design and strategy. And I've been specifically interested in location-based games because I've done a PhD about this topic, about what is the potential of location-based applications for gaming. And I've been working on this topic for 5 years. Interested in, for example, platforms such as Moji. I don't know if you ever played this game. It's one of the earliest version and maybe one of the biggest success in the location-based game segment. It was designed by a French company called Nude Games in 2002 for the Japanese market. And it was bought by a phone carrier, and that went bankrupt afterwards. So unfortunately, the game is not played anymore. What is interesting with location-based games, and mostly with all location-based applications, apart from the GPS you have in your car, is that when you read reports from consulting companies or foresight companies like Gartner, you often end up with this kind of quotes, like location-aware service integration into application began, a critical mass of network and device support will occur through 2006. That was the report in 2003. And then each year in the report, you see the same predictions, as if the future was postponed, as if there was some sort of proximal future. We will have location-based applications. We will have location-based games, but it seems to be expected. We don't have it yet. So I'm interested in understanding why, what happened, what are the reasons for those applications to fail so badly. And before mentioning that, I'm a bit pessimistic here, but I'm really interested in the potential of those applications. I work with game designers. I work with system designers. We developed some platform. It was really entertaining, and it was really interesting, but it did not really materialize in terms of user adoption in the same way as other console games have done. So what are the reasons? What are the pain points, if I may? So the first big problem with everything related with a location-based application is privacy. The fact that you could be tracked, that the systems could collect information about your position and your wandering in space is a problem for people, regardless of the application itself. There are some people who don't want to use this kind of system because they fear that it's an intrusion in their life. And even with kids and teenagers in Europe, which is a pretty interesting segment, who put information about themselves on blogs, on Facebook, and social software, they have trouble understanding how they could be traced by location-based application. They fear that their parents could trace them. Even with games, they fear that the game could be some sort of Trojan horse for other people to see where they are located in space, and that's a problem for them. Another important issue regarding location-based application is the fact that the user interface is a bit limited, especially when you want to represent maps. In general, in lots of location-based applications, the interface is based on a map. And the map on cell phones is still a problem. Of course, we have nice iPhones or any smartphone with bigger screens, but the larger segments of populations don't have those platforms. They have tiny phones with tiny keyboards with tiny screens. And so far, most of the location-based games have had troubles using this sort of screens, limited screens, to represent the information for the players. Another big problem is the fact that most of the location-based games, and especially if you look at social location-based applications, most of the location-based games are multiplayer and based on a multiplayer model. And the problem is that they have value if there's a large number of people playing those games. And as speakers earlier mentioned it, there's some trouble to have some critical mass of people on those platforms for lots of reasons. The first reason is the hardware fragmentation. When you have like 450 cell phone models, as you just described, it's a problem to develop common application. It's a problem also in terms of software fragmentation to have the same tools to develop for those platforms. And of course, I don't want to blame them, but there's still the mobile phone carriers, which have their walled gardens and doesn't want necessarily to pass information from one operator to another about their consumers' location. So in the end, what happened is that the market is fragmented. And for all those location-based applications which are based on a multiplayer model, what happened is that it's difficult to play when you're alone in a game. It's as if you are alone on Facebook, or it's as if you are only one shoe. This is represented by this graph here, which portrays the Metcalfe flow. It's a law in the study of communication, which says that the value of a network depends on the square of the number of the nodes of the network. So the more nodes you have, the better it is for the participants. For example, if you're alone with a cell phone, it's not really useful. If you have two persons with a cell phone, it's better. And the more you have cell phones, the better it is to have communications. And it's the same for location-based applications based on this multiplayer model. And since most of those location-based applications are based on a multiplayer model, and that there is no critical mass of people, the user experience is limited because it's like being alone. Another big problem we investigated in my research is the fact that location-based application is based on very complex infrastructure. It's not just you sitting on a couch with your Nintendo console playing. It requires, especially if it's a mobile application, it requires a complex infrastructure made of, for example, GSM communication, 3G, also positioning technologies such as GPS or other techniques like cell IDs to capture the position of your cell phone with regards to the cell phone antennas in the city. And what happens when you have a complex system with a complex infrastructure is that, as represented on this slide, technology with its infrastructure often fails. There are often problems. There are often needs for this infrastructure to be fixed. I like this picture. It's not really related to location-based application, of course, but it shows the wires one of the company I work for had to have a wireless communication in their building. The Wi-Fi needed all those wires to make it accessible for people. What I mean here is that for lots of location-based applications that use GPS or cell phone communication, there are often problems like this. Last week I was speaking with one of the urban designers from the Paris subway, and then the guy told me that to install GSM on the whole Paris subway, they needed to put like 20 or 25 square meters boxes in the subway in the subway station. This means something really huge to implement in Paris subway station. It also means that they would have to remove some advertisement and also to have less space for people waiting on the station. So it means that there's a problem. Putting the infrastructure will reshape totally the space and the business model of the subway station. And of course, for people who wanted to design location-based application in the subway in Paris Metro, because of course you could not use GPS because you're underground. It was not really possible to use GSM so far. So there are problems, there are issues like this related with the infrastructure. And when it's not a problem of failure or a problem of implementing or putting new infrastructure, it's a problem of ownership. Like those, I like using that picture of the different power adapter that we had to use when we invite people for a seminar in Switzerland. We have to plug different adapter. What I mean here is that it's difficult when you have people playing from different countries to certain location-based applications. It's very difficult for them to play in one country and then try to play their games in another one, because there are always some infrastructure issues like those. Another one that is maybe a bit similar is the fact that when you play a game on a platform like a console game or a PC, the space is very easy because it has been designed by the designers. But when you play in real life, when you play with location-based applications, the real world is the game board, is the game level. So what happened? You cannot control everything. So for example, this is the campus, the Swiss Institute of Technology campus, where we deployed a location-based game 3 years ago. And we used the Wi-Fi antennas to locate people in space. We used a sort of algorithm that would triangulate the signal from the different antennas to locate participants in the game on this campus. And on this slide, I mapped the signal strength of all those Wi-Fi antennas. So as you can see here, if you want to use this infrastructure to position people in space, the results would be very different depending on the place on the campus where you would be located. For example, if you're here, it's fairly easy to be well located to receive information and to display this information about your location on campus. But if you're in that part, wandering around here, the positioning of your character in the game would be awful because there's no Wi-Fi antennas in the south of the campus. So what happened for the players of this game was that the experience was very discontinuous. Sometimes it was okay, they were properly located in space, but sometimes it was not the case. And this is just an example with Wi-Fi, but with GPS, it could be terrible as well, depending on where you are located, depending on the configuration of the city you're wandering around, depending on whether you're on the sidewalk, on the middle of the street. And there is no perfect solution for perfect positioning, unfortunately. So in terms of user experience, it's difficult for the participants, it's difficult for the users. And we ran lots of tests, we had interviews with players, and most of them were asking this question after playing the game. They were wondering, why the hell was I located here when I was not in that place, I was in this other place? They were not really understanding why the system was not working properly. This means that people had really high expectations about location-based applications because they used location-based systems in their cars with the GPS and car navigation systems, and they translate this kind of experience in other situations like location-based games. And it's not the case. It's not really the same. It doesn't work in the same way, unfortunately. What happened is that we ran different tests to see how the infrastructure or how the level of granularity could change depending on where you are located in the city and where the people were moving around. And depending on the places, we had really different quality of service. For example, here, this is all those dots represent the person's location in that space with a certain device. And this was with another device. So there were tremendous differences depending on the phone models, depending on the techniques, whether we use GPS or Wi-Fi. So in the end, the location quality was difficult, and it was really amazingly difficult to design an application for that matter. So now that I've somehow painted a gloomy picture of the situation, what can be done? Is it possible to design or to think about the future of location-based application and location-based games in a more meaningful way. So I see two scenarios based on the elements I've given you. The first one is that reality, the real world, is really complex. And we accept this complexity. We accept that things could fail, that the location quality can be bad. And we have to deal with that to design future products. So some ideas to improve some products could be, first, to be less ambitious and not think about positioning people in the environment. Maybe it could be more interesting to use proximity between people and their partners, or between people and access points, to design meaningful application. This is an application called Familiar Stranger, developed by Intel. It's not a game at all, but to me it's a very interesting location-based application because it allows people to know the familiar strangers of the city. Familiar strangers are the people you see every morning at the bus stop or at the train station. Through Bluetooth, this application allowed people to be aware of people that they met already, but the system does not really indicate their position in space. The system does not indicate their identity. It just indicates that you already encountered this person one day, and it gives people a sort of feeling of comfort in the city. And I think that this kind of application could be turned into game system in a really interesting way, because it allows people to, it allows the system to not be intrusive in terms of privacy, because there is no identity involved, and it uses the proximity, which is something that is not really explored. We have thought about location-based system, but not really about proximity. Another things we explored in the research I've carried out is the fact that instead of trying to locate people in space, to position them on the map with technology, we'd simply ask people to self-declare their own location in space. So that was a game we designed and that we developed this was in 2002, so there were still tablet PCs. Now it's a bit passé. But we developed this game on tablet PC, on PDA, and some cell phone models. And people just had to declare where they were located in space. And then there were some specific game events that were happening. And it was really simple because we didn't have to use a specific positioning infrastructure, and we could get rid of the problem, the continuity problem I mentioned a few minutes ago. Another interesting example of maybe closer to the game world is this new game called Treasure Trove that has been developed by Aspire, a game studio on the Nintendo DS. So instead of, well, there's not many location-based applications on the Nintendo DS. So this studio figured out that it would be interesting to, instead of positioning people with their game console in the physical world, they would use the Wi-Fi access points that could be detected through proximity between the console, the player, and the Wi-Fi access point. They use the access point as a sort of place where you could collect items in the game. So people are wandering around in a city, and when they're close to a certain Wi-Fi network, it allows them to collect items that are based on the Wi-Fi signal. And of course, it's a bit random. Of course, it's not as ambitious and as promising as perfect positioning technologies. But it's still interesting in terms of game design practices because there are plenty of Wi-Fi signals in this room, in the street. And if you can turn all those elements from the physical world into game features, it's really promising from a game design point of view. I would skip that one. So I mentioned the first path, which is reality is a mess, and we deal with it, and we try to be less ambitious. There is, of course, a second path that I see coming now is we don't accept this mess, and we really want to have location-based applications that are perfect, that use perfect positioning. But in this case, what's the solution? Is it really possible? The only possible solution so far is to use the laser game or the paintball model. Laser games, I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of game. Are games you play, for example, in an old warehouse with laser guns that are are really, really far from console games or video games. But in this case, they use a sort of fixed infrastructure in the physical environment that designers can control. They could create specific challenges and features, allow multiplayer applications. And in this case, with a proper control of the platform, it would be easy to design perfect or very ambitious location-based games, but it will only happen in this kind of place, unfortunately. So I have 5 seconds to tell you about what's next and what I'm interested in right now in terms of what would be the next phase that would be different. So right now there's a lot of activity on real-time data aggregation based on cell phone activities. I'm sure you're familiar with the real-time Roam project, in which people from MIT collected the cell phone activity in a city and mapped this cell phone activity on real-time maps like this. All of this is interesting in terms of game potential. It has never been explored, and it could be interesting to tap into all the data we produced taking pictures, using our cell phone activities that could be traced with location-based application to turn this into more concrete material. And this is a really interesting and original avenue that hasn't been really investigated yet. And thank you very much.
You left a gem at the end, Nicolas.
Yeah.
We have time for some questions. So again, we are open for questions. On the right, Mark will be, and here I am. Yeah, you'll be there, Stefan, if there's really no. You got your one question. Any other questions? There in the back.
Rob Shepard again, another second question. I'm interested in how you might incorporate augmented reality into this. So a little bit like the ghost thing we saw before, but giving a context. Let's say you had a first-person shooter that you wanted to do, and you could just use it in any kind of environment. Are there any technological advances, anything that's going this direction? Somebody, a company?
Well, I wouldn't say that there are technological advances in this field. It's more like stabilizing. There were lots of interesting developments in the augmented reality field, and now it's merging with location-based systems. I don't know if you're familiar with Nokia mobile augmented reality. That's an interesting platform that merges the different approach. And regarding one of the problems I mentioned, the fact that phones are tiny, have tiny screens, and maps are a bit problematic to view on the screen. Augmented reality, like in the Ghost project that has been shown previously, it's really interesting to merge all the different techniques to do something meaningful to the user. There are some, well, it's mostly research lab things. There are some, of course, some mobile games that, like Agent V and the Nokia platform, that use this kind of thing. But apart from that, it's more people are integrating those different technologies to produce meaningful stuff, I would say.
There's another question on Mark's side in front of him.
Great. Ronald. So you are, of course, you're saying reality is a mess, and I agree, because I've had so many GPS problems also. But instead of looking into other technological solutions, do you have any experience of using the mess as more of a design principle? And do you have any experience how that works out, and if players are forgiving?
Well, I haven't designed an application that would use mess as a design principle per se. But what I find interesting when you, when you spend time with players, when you try to understand how they play, how they use the environment, how they use the system to meet with their goals, is that they're really, really creative in finding tactics or strategies that actually use the mess for this. For example, in one of the games I mentioned, the one we designed where people had to self-declare their location, there were some places in the game where people had no network. And some people were hiding in those areas as a way to trick their partners or to trick their opponents in the game. That's really interesting to see how the players, the users, the participants are are not that dumb. They know how things work, and they know how they could turn this mess into some specific game feature. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Final question, maybe? Oh. Just one, Yuri.
Thank you. Great talk. One question. This year at edge.org there was a question about what will change everything in your field. So my question to you is the same. What will change everything within location-based gaming in the next few years?
That people accept that the world is a mess, and that it's really difficult to design with this mess, but that's what they should do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nick.